How's it going, guys? Well, once again we find ourselves in a familiar spot in front of this old Chevy pickup with the hood open and some parts laying around in front of it. So we're operating today under the threat of some severe weather and severe lawn mowing. The neighbor to the rear of me back here has been running his mower, but I think he's done with it, so maybe you can hear me. He's got the weed eater going now, but it makes me think that maybe Weed Eater Man wasn't so bad after all. Old Weed Eater Man. So what are we doing today? Well, today we are continuing to go down the list of small issues that needed to be fixed up on this truck before it really gets driven very far, very much. And thankfully we're running out of those, so we're just about got everything straightened out on it. I still have a horn that doesn't work, but and a blower mower that's not doing its thing, as you saw in another video. But what I'm doing today is I had to diagnose why my oil pressure and temperature gauges weren't working. And you've seen a month or two back when I made a parts run to the junkyard, I picked up a replacement gauge cluster for this truck because the one that was in it was just really trashed. The gas gauge was all over the place. It was going all the way around like this. And I wonder what just fell. Oh, the flashlight. But so it had issues, but I got the new one in and it looks real good, and the oil gauge never worked even with the new one. It's just stayed pegged all the way over. And the temperature gauge worked briefly, and then it just barely would come up, and just barely even come up. And I know this thing was running at the right temperature because you can always tell when you've had a lot of these GMs of this era, when they're at operating temperature, you can let the engine idle and you'll hear the thermostatic fan kind of just barely kick on and off a little bit. It'll just barely speed up and then slow down. I'm talking about the fan, not the engine. And so you know it's running, you know, it's not overheating and it's not running cold. So I knew my issues had to be with either the gauges or the wiring or the sending units. And so I want to do a video kind of talking about how to diagnose these gauges and these sending units and the wiring, and so you don't go needlessly replacing parts, because parts are not cheap anymore and not everybody has a whole lot of money to waste. I sure don't. So the first thing I did, and the first thing you need to do when you have a gauge problem, you need to figure out if it's the gauge or the device, i.e. the sending unit that operates it, or the wiring in between. And since we're dealing with a temperature gauge and an oil gauge, that was easy to do because if we know about gauges, if you don't know about gauges, how they work, I'll explain it. But typically your gauges, the way they operate is the instrument cluster as a unit is supplied, when the key is turned on, is supplied with 12 volts to the instrument cluster, and you have 12 volts going to each side of each gauge. In other words, you have 12 volts going to the side of the oil gauge, you have 12 volts going to the side of the temp gauge, you have 12 volts going to the side of the fuel gauge. The other side of that gauge means you have to have a lead coming in and a lead going out to get it to operate. But the other side of that's always going to a ground, at least on GM. Some other makes may be different, so you need to do your own research on that, but that's how these work. And it doesn't matter, sometimes even doesn't matter if it's got a light or a gauge, it's the way it works. And the ground side, which means the senders and the wiring going to the senders, are what causes them to actually complete the circuit and function. So if you have dead gauges or dead instrument lights, like warning lights, first thing you want to check is make sure you're getting power to them. In this case I checked the fuse. It was good. The gauges are powering up, and the way you can really test that is you take the little second step of this process is you come out to the engine compartment and you find where your wiring is that goes to the particular gauge in question. In this case we're dealing with two different ones, so we got two different wires. Now on this one, the first one I was going to deal with was the oil pressure gauge, and the sending unit for it is back here on a Chevy 350. It's always normally mounted right on the top of the engine block behind the distributor, kind of to the left of it. As you can see, that's it right there. Kind of pull my wires out of the way so you can kind of get a better look, but it's kind of down in there. It's not real easy to deal with. Let me see if I can get my light. We'll take a little better look. I'm kind of guilty of not showing much detail, I guess, but let's do that. Come in here with me, will you? But there it is, and it's just kind of screws in. It's got a little adapter there. That's the top of the adapter. The adapter kind of goes straight down in the block like that, and this is one for the gauge. This is always larger. If you have a light, normally it'll just have a little short one, and nowhere won't have that big can appearance on it. So we always want to make sure when you're getting a different, you know, I have the one out, I'll show it to you too, but when you're buying a replacement sending unit, get the right one. But let's kind of back up a little bit, not get ahead of ourselves. So what we're doing first is we need to find out why the oil pressure gauge wasn't working. And this case is pegged all the way out. And on a GM like this, when either the circuit from the gauge to the sending unit is open, which means it's not connected, the gauge will go all the way over to the peg, all the way to the right. That's what this one's doing. So a real quick test to see if you have a wiring problem or that's actually the sender is you pull the wire off of it. It's that right back there at the top. That's the wire to it back there. This is normally they're kind of a tan color on GMs. You pull the wire, and this is for gauges. This is not, yeah, I guess it could work for either one, but in this case on this gauge, this is the way I did it. I pulled the wire off back there, and I took a little small piece of wire and put in that connector, and then I used a jumper wire and I jumped it to a known good ground. I grounded that wire, and when I grounded that wire and turned the key on, the gauge immediately went all the way over back to 0. So when it did that, that told me, so we got the blower on back there now. These people in this neighborhood, they're freaking, they love leaf blowing. You would think that all the work, and I'm not against having a nice yard, but you would think that all the time that people spend blowing leaves and blowing every little blade of grass, that we would live in a $250,000 neighborhood. And it ain't one, I can tell you that. We got a house down there that's empty, that foreclosed on, that one, and that guy, every time they come to try to evict him, he'd run off in the woods back there. Idiot. But so anyway, sorry about that. But so when I grounded that wire, the gauge went all the way to 0. That told me that my gauge is good, my circuit's good, that the problem was in that sending unit back there. And so sure enough, when I pulled it out, removed it, this is the old one. This is what you're dealing with here. I put the ohm meter on it. This is my ohm meter right here. I put the ohm meter on it, it's completely dead. You know, if you take an ohm meter or take your meter and turn it to ohms, and you touch your two, see if I can do it on camera, touch your two connections here, it goes all the way to 0. So this thing is completely, wouldn't do that. It's no response, so it's completely burned up, open, it's junk. So it's no good. So replace that, and that's fine now. It's working like it should. And let me, while we're talking about oil sending units, let me give you a couple notes to remember. These things use a tapered thread on here, which means that it's like, well, in simple terms, it means that this threaded area here starts out more narrow at this end of this tip and gets wider as it goes, so you don't have to worry about trying to screw this thing all the way in. You see, this one wasn't that far in, and it got tight. It gets tighter after a certain spot. So that's a brass adapter in there. So do not torque this thing like crazy, or you will be removing that adapter and replacing it back there. So I just tightened this one up till it just started to get snug, and that's it. They have hardly ever seen one of those leak. So, and here's something else we need to know about oil sending units on a 350 Chevy, or a 305 Chevy, or a 262 Chevy, or a 265 Chevy, whatever you have, or a 267. Normally they're up there. Okay, so that's your oil gallery up there. The later engines, after about 87, when they started putting TBI on them, the fuel injected engines, most of them started having an additional oil pressure switch down here above the oil filter. The oil filter on these is right down, you can see it. Can you see it? It's right back there behind the exhaust manifold. So a lot of times you'll see one back there also, and it'll normally have 2 wires going to it. I've seen on boards, a lot of people get confused about that. They wonder, well, why is there 2? Why is there one up here with 1 wire and why is there one with 2 wires down here? Normally that one is just a switch, and it's normally wired into something like the fuel injection circuit, so it's kind of a safeguard. If the oil pressure drops off to 0 or below a certain point, that switch will close and it will kill the circuit, so, or open, but it'll activate, let's put it that way. And to my knowledge, that's what that does. So you ever see that one down there, that's not the one that runs the gauge, okay? The one that runs the gauge is up here. That's the gauge. That's something else. So if you have 2 of these, like on a TBI 350 or 305, don't let it confuse you, because you need to know what you're dealing with. And that idea has been used before. If you'll remember that 83 old station wagon that I had, it had the 231 V6 Buick V6 in it, and it uses an oil pressure sending unit that has, I believe it has 2 connections on the sending unit itself and 3 wires going to it. And the way it works is the 2 wires that are paired, one of them is for the light or the gauge. In that case it had a light, and that only takes 1 wire, and the other wire in that pair was part of the choke circuit. So actually what they did was they made that thing serve double duty. So it pushed 12 volts through there, and as long as the engine was off and no oil pressure, the switch was open and it could not heat the choke up. So that they did that to keep the choke from opening if you sat there with your key turned over without the engine running. So there's something else to confuse you. And also you'll see on a lot of these Chevys that they will have a, let's see if we can find it here. Let me get my light again. Come here, light, come here. You'll see down in the front there's also another oil gallery plug on here, and I'm thinking, see it right there, it is right there. I see that a lot on these engines, and that probably could be used for a gauge if you just wanted to, but it's kind of in a weird place, so it's right under the alternator, so I don't think I'd do that. So okay then, we got our oil gauge working, so now we know what our senders are and where they're at. So let's talk about the temperature sending unit. The temperature gauge wouldn't work either. It worked briefly and then it fratzed out too. So I've seen confusion on this, especially with these TBI. Yeah, I turned up a little louder, man. The people on the arsenal, they ain't heard it yet either. So anyway, you see why I hate this neighborhood. I hate this neighborhood. It sucks. It sucks. I hate having to listen to other people. Oh, hate it. I am so ready for peace and quiet. I don't want to hear another damn lawnmower. I don't want to hear another vehicle with that stupid music blaring out of it. This is the kind of stuff that has made me just really sick of people. It just is. Having to be around them all the time. Oh. Yeah, make noise, man. Anyway, back on track, guys. I'm sorry I interject that stuff sometimes. I can just get a little frustrated. But we were talking about our temperature sending unit, and probably getting sick from all the exhaust fumes of people coming by here on Grand Central Street here. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. You complain in every video, you dumbass. Move if you don't like it. Well, maybe I will move if I don't like it. Like that. Anyway, we had a temp gauge not working, so let's talk about our temperature sending units. I saw this on the forum. This guy got confused because the TBI engines had the fuel injected, not the carbureted engines, had 2 temperature sending units on them. They had the one that has been in just about every small block Chevy from 1955 on up, which is below, let's see how I can show you that. There we go. You see where that's at? See that little brass deal right there? That's it. It's between the 1 and the 3rd cylinder on this passenger, driver's side head. And that's where they've been to run the gauge or the light since probably 1955 or so, including the throttle body engines. Okay, so pay attention to this. So if you have a gauge, it's in a throttle body equipped vehicle like a truck or a van, and it's reading all the way over to high, or it's reading all the way over to low, whatever it quit, whatever the problem is, be advised that there's another one up here in the thermostat housing. You see how this thermostat housing, this is a replacement, and it's got a plug in it. Well, that's one for a TBI. It'll also work on a TBI. And what happens is, now some of them are not in the thermostat, some of them are actually in a runner, but suffice to say they're up here, so it's in the coolant passage, and people get mixed up. They say, well, that's the one for the gauge right there. No, it's not the one for the gauge, that's the one for the computer. The computer has to read engine temperature to know how to control the fuel trim and the timing and all that. It has to know how the engine's warmed up. It does not use that one to run the computer. That one is strictly for the gauge or the light, okay? Do not confuse those two, because this guy, he was complaining. He said that his gauge wasn't reading right, so he replaced the one up here at the front on the thermostat, and it still didn't read right, so he can understand how you got 2 temperature sensors that were bad. You didn't. You replaced the wrong one. So I try to be kind of direct about that, so, you know, it's like people are fond of saying now, let me be perfectly clear. Let me be perfectly clear. The temperature sensor on any small block that's up here does not have anything to do with the gauge of the light. That's strictly for the computer. Okay, guys, and here's what the thing looks like. Also, the one that's taken out, if you want to see that. This thing is, I did a ohm the new one before I put it in, and then I ohmed this one after I took it out. And the new one had like 472 ohms cold, and this one had like 1900 and something, so it's way out of calibration, I guess. And it ain't looking too good anyway. You see, it looks like it's been hit or dropped, or it's cracked up and stuff. So probably what it was just in the head, and I had the heads off, because this is what's unusual. This is not really the one that goes in this engine. This is one off an older set of heads. This is the older style. So has a slip-on button connector right there. So this has been a long video, guys. I hope you stuck with me through this, and if you got any questions, I'm always glad to answer your questions and help you understand. That's why I'm here. That's why I do these videos, is to try to spread factual information, and not hearsay, and, you know, people that think something's wrong, or somebody said to them, told them something was this, something was that. We don't do that here. We do facts. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for listening to my occasional outbursts of ranting about my neighborhood. Don't ever move here. Don't ever move here. Never. Move out in the country. So appreciate you guys. Have a good one.